A lot of people featured in this project are not necessarily household names, but people, musicians, male and female, who are really respected within the musical fraternity, and it's very strong here in Ireland. A lot of us know each other going back 20, 30, 40 years. Our next person to speak is one of my favourites, great musician, keyboardist, singer, you name it, he's done it all. And his name is Alan Dee. Alan, you're very welcome.
Thanks, man.
Now, tell me, as with all of the guest artists we have in, we like to know where they started. Can you remember?
Well, it started in a shed in the back garden, like so many, and a skiffle group. Now, this would be in the early or mid-50s, believe it or not. Lonnie Donegan was a huge influence. And a couple of friends of mine that lived on the same road formed a skiffle group, and we call ourselves the Hot Dogs.
Appropriate.
Very. And we all went to 3 different schools. One of the quite nice ones, as it turned out. Blackrock College, of course. Not me now. And Gonzaga, the bass player, came from. And I went to a little school, I almost said Kip, St. Conleth's College, and a school for the sons of gentlemen. Load of, how's your father? Well, again, we had no instruments really. The guy who played the drums made drums out of paint pots, and I made a guitar for myself out of paper mache, believe it or not, copying the Country Gentleman on Elvis's golden discs. I don't know if you know that LP. He wears the gold
I do, yeah.
lame suit with the blue lyrics. I made this wondrous guitar, and I had it hanging up, the paint drying in the shed, and I invited people around to look at it. And a guy called Staunton, who could play the piano very well, was quite musical, came along, and he said, "Looks great, all right, but will it play?" And I thought, who cares whether it plays or not, you know? I mean, I just wanted to pose with it. The frets were made out of matchsticks.
Yeah.
And they were just put on anywhere, you know. And I bought a set of strings for it in Gill's Music Shop. Now, there's one you won't remember. Nassau Street.
Nope.
Gone ages. It was so old, it was like Victorian. And Mr. Gill himself used to wear morning dress, like a tail jacket and a white bow tie, and he'd serve you. And the only strings you could get for a guitar at that time were nylon or gut strings.
Yeah.
Spanish guitars, really. So I just put the strings on it and I went cha-chung, cha-chung, cha-chung. I'm left-handed, and made any old noise at all out of it, and sang Maybe Baby by Buddy Holly. And an enormous influence, Buddy Holly. What I find interesting is talking to people of my own generation and reading about people, the Beatles, the Animals, people that would be roughly my own age, that we all started the same way. We all started listening to Lonnie Donegan. We all loved Buddy Holly. We all were impressed by Elvis Presley. How could you be otherwise? First thing I ever heard about Elvis was his name. And I was watching a TV show, black and white BBC it must have been, and in between the lines, this American teenager was being interviewed about being an American teenager, and how do you relate to your grandparents, you know? And she was, "Oh, my grandparents are really sweet, you know. I play my grandmother my Elvis Presley records." And I went, "Who? Elvis Presley?" The name itself was enough.
Super name.
Super.
You couldn't get any better.
I mean, it's just... And then All Shook Up was the first record. You could play it on the jukebox in the Chipper in Bagot Street. And that really was the start of it. So you were getting... influence was Lonnie Donegan and the Skiffle. Cumberland Gap, 16 mile to the Cumberland Gap. You could never sing as high as Lonnie Donegan.
Very good.
And then I liked a bit about trad jazz. This was happening at the same time.
Acker Bilk.
Acker Bilk. I even attempted, and will, with a few on me, do it again. The clarinet, the old Stranger on the Shore, and Creole jazz. Great old stuff. But and even Frank Sinatra impinged, like The Lady is a Tramp is a song I play to this day. That was one of the first songs I ever learned. And the Gonzaga boy who played the bass, which was a T-chest bass, he had some musical talent, which we didn't, the other two of us didn't seem to understand why it was needed, and he's told me the second chord in The Lady of the Tramp, if it was in C, is E flat. She gets too hungry, and that was, wow, such a musical revelation. I used to play in G when I did manage to play the guitar at all. I played everything in G. The open G, clang, 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 clang. I remember my father saying, pity you're not a bit more like Desi. He can play like in different keys, and I don't want to hear that,
Desi was?
That was the Gonzaga bass player.
Okay.
Yeah. He could actually get riffs on a T-chest bass.
Okay.
But so, I mean, most people just go boom, 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 boom. But he actually could extract something that sounded musical.
Wow.
He was a big influence, really, on that front, because he bought a book called the Ivor Morant's Encyclopedia of Chords. I don't know if you ever came across it.
No.
Again, you couldn't get sort of guitar tutors back then, any more than you could get guitars. Like you could maybe order a Spanish guitar in McCullough Piggott's or something, but like as far as a Fender and all that, electric guitars, no way, So that's why we decided to make our own.
Super. Can we just go on a little bit now? Your first gig, Alan, can you remember your first paying gig?
Was a New Year's Eve in 1960.
1916?
1916, yeah. We're coming up to the centenary now.
Yeah.
I was in a tennis club in Dunleary, and our equipment was pretty basic.
Yeah.
It was the hot dogs with a drummer, and the drummer had now become a rhythm guitarist. So we had two guitars and a bass, which consisted of just a guitar with just the four strings on the. As again, bass guitar, unheard of.
Yeah.
And then a guy called Mervyn Dalton played the drums, who I still play with. And we were about 16. And I must have been 17, because I drove to the gig in a Fiat 600. And we managed to get the four of us into this Fiat 600 and the drums tied to the roof. And John Keogh, who I'm sure you're familiar with, John,
yes.
The Green Beats,
yes, yeah.
He was playing in the other tennis club in Dunleary. And for some reason, I don't know why, that gig didn't go so well. Only a few people turned up. So they just said, well, we hear that the hot dogs are up the road. So we got quite a good crowd. And I think we got 17 shillings each.
Good money then. Some musicians are still playing for that.
Yeah, absolutely. But that was the first gig, where I got money.
Yeah.
After that, then I joined. I got the only job I ever had was a sales clerk in Roadstone on the Nace Road. Again with my friend Mervyn Dalton, and he was playing with a band at the time, the Belmonts Quintet, And at this point now, I had decided the guitar wasn't for me. There were too many guitarists who were better than me, and the saxophone was my next object of desire.
Okay.
So Mervyn asked me to join the Belmonts, and the end of the gig, we played in a place called Glenanne Tennis Club near the KCR there. This was 100 years ago. And at the end of the night, Peter Coyle, who was the leader, came up to me and gave me £4 and apologised. I'm sorry, the money's not very good, you know, and we're splitting it now 6 ways with you and the band, and there's, you know. I was getting £5 a week in Roadstone as a sales clerk, you know.
Yeah.
And there was £4 and the promise of more the next time, you know. So it just shows you how things have changed, really.
Absolutely.
And very much for the worst.
Yeah.
Like, you would get a week's wages for a night's gig, which now, what's the the hypothetical wage? What do they call us?
The minimum
average industrial
wage. Yeah.
It's about £600.
600 and something. Yeah.
You know, imagine getting that for a gig.
Absolutely.
For yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, when I think of Alan, when a lot of people think of Alan, I mean, you've done many, many things. You've done musicals, which we'll get to in a minute. But I also think of Alan Dee and the Chessmen, Alan Dee and Watchtower.
Yeah.
Two very well respected, great bands. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, the Chessmen came out of the band I'm just talking about, the Belmonts. After a while, they decided to go back to. They were fed up with the sextet, and they went back to a quintet. But we had done a gig, and this little band called the Chessmen played support, just 3 Sing Street boys, and their manager Noel Pearson. And they said, "Would you be interested in joining?" I said, "Oh, I'm in a band, you know. You guys are very young and all."
Inexperienced.
Yeah, you know, I've done gigs for money, you know. And the next thing, anyhow, is that the Belmonts throw me out of the band. So I got on to Noel Pearson and I said, "I happen to be available now, you know." And he said, "Well, come down to the Marion College, we're rehearsing down there and we'll see." So I went down and I had my sax in the car. I had an Morris Minor at that stage. And I knew they were trying out guys, you know. And I listened at the door and I heard this guy on the sax and he wasn't as good as me. And I was brutal. But anyhow, I took the sax out with great confidence and I was much better looking than this guy as well. You know, of course. Believe it or not, I was once, you know, considered a pretty boy.
You were a fine-looking thing, Alan. I remember you being a fine thing.
Stuck out.
Yeah.
That's funny. I met an old girlfriend of mine recently, and she went, "Alan, what happened? You used to be a fine thing." I didn't return the compliment.
We're going to be putting photographs in there, don't worry. We were all fine things.
Absolutely.
We were all fine things.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
But anyway, so the Chessmen.
So I joined the Chessmen. I played Tequila and got the gig. And that lasted for a while. But at the time I was suffering dreadful tonsillitis. And I had my tonsils removed and it didn't help. Anything but, in fact. And I was told what you're doing is every time you put that saxophone in your mouth, you're reinfecting yourself.
Ah, yeah.
So I said to the chessmen, "Look, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave. I have to give up the saxophone, you know." And the drummer said, "Do you know any other saxophone players?" I said, "No." "Do you know any organ players? Do you know anybody that have an organ?" And I said, "Well, if I get an organ, can I stay in the band?" And he said, "Sure." So I went down to Jerry Rafferty's of Fownes's Street.
Yes, remember it well.
and I bought the first and only Fox Continental organ for £275 in 1964. That was.
That was serious money.
It's fierce money.
Serious money.
I got a loan from Smart Brothers. There were tailors that did a Never Never skill.
HP.
I don't know what arrangement they had, but anyway, they did a deal. And I paid in 6 months now. It just shows you how the old band business was going. In 6 months, I had it paid off all but 60 quid.
Wow.
You know?
So you'd be doing gigs, tennis clubs, ballrooms?
This was with the Chessmen.
With the Chessmen, yeah.
And Pearson was brilliant, you know. He could engineer gigs here, there, and everywhere. We were playing tennis clubs and then the beat clubs. We were talking earlier about
the very
Sound
first
City,
Sound
which
City.
was the first beat club, Burkey. Later Club Art, or it was, but by then it had turned more sort of disco-y. Though they had a little band, they catered for a sort of middle class rugby club type.
Yeah.
Clientele.
So you've gone from guitar to saxophone. Now you're a keyboard player.
Yeah. And it was funny, like, people all along always said, you know, you're trying to play the guitar, or you're trying to play the saxophone there. You know, when you play the piano, it always sounds much better. And of course, the magic thing about the piano or a keyboard is you don't have to tune it. If it's not in tune, it's not your fault, you know?
Yeah.
And that was the big difference.
Brilliant.
And I thank God for it now, because I'm still playing the piano.
Yeah.
But where would I have got a gig as a sax player or a guitar player, you know?
So we left. Did the Chessmen break up, or did you leave?
No, we kept going I was with them for about 3 years, and I rose through the ranks. What happened is the Rolling Stones came on the scene, and the guy who was singing in the band at the time refused to sing Rolling Stones songs because he said it would be bad for his voice. So I went, sir, I'll do it. And I came out from behind the organ and I took up the maracas and I went, I'm going to tell you how it's going to be.
So now you're a maraca player.
And the girls started screaming.
Brilliant.
And I, on the strength of that alone, became the front man for the Chessmen and made a few records with them. And then what happened was, we had management trouble. We made a huge mistake. One of the greatest. I'm a man who makes wonderful mistakes, and we sacked Noel Pearson,
who went on to be a very famous.
Went on to be Noel Pearson, impresario, filmmaker, producer. Now he's always been a friend of mine, even though he said it hurt like a girl breaking it off with you. And I remember that sticking in the brain. You know? And what a stupid mistake. What happened is, this guy had been talking to us. He was a great manager, Mick Quinn, recently deceased. And he was going to do this, that and the other. And we went with him. And then we went into a band meeting in the office. There was Noel Pearson on the phone booking us out.
Oh, no.
So we now had 2 managers, and then Quinner had a partner as well, Robert McGrattan. So there was 3 of them managing us. And then they decided to bring in another guy, Con Hines, who used to hire out tents for carnivals all around Ireland. A man from the country, shall we say, Portumna.
Okay.
And we went in for a band meeting in Powers Hotel, as it was then. And I had in my mind, now I'm the lead man here, and I was doing extra promotion for the band and interviews and up to Belfast to appear on UTV and stuff like that. And I wasn't getting any extra for it. So I said to the gathered ensemble that I wanted more money because I was doing more work. And Con Hines, who I'd only met that day, said, is there anybody else in the band that sings? And John, baritone sax player, John L. Sullivan, good friend, still playing, he said, well, I'm like the second vocalist now. Right, well, you're the lead singer now. And now you play the organ, says he, pointed at me. And I said, yeah, that's right. He said, well, now, if there's one thing I know about show business, the punters love an accordion. So you get rid of that organ and get an accordion. I walked down the steps of Powers Hotel and I thought, this isn't going well right. So I handed in my notice, and it took a good while before they let me go. At the same time, Bobby Balla, the artist, was playing the bass with the Chessmen. And he too had decided enough was enough. Like, they wanted us to compete with Big Tom,
Yeah.
They wanted you to go down this. They said, you're not going down well in the country, They said, well, we can't be Big Tom. We can't talk about haystacks and trailers and
4 roads leading that way and this way and the other way.
But we're Dublin guys. We can't pretend to be cultures, you know. I mean, it just wouldn't work. But they didn't see it that way at all. I mean, they tried to countrify us and make everybody sing a country and western song. I sang Tiger by the Tail, I remember. Anyhow, that was the end of me and the Chessmen.
Okay.
And I've been discontented anyway. The Chessmen, when they started, were a beat group.
Yeah.
And the way they talked me into them becoming a show band, so to speak, they were never really a show band, but they got a brass section. So they got John L. on the baritone sax, a good tenor player called Pascal Haverty, and a magnificent trumpet player, Davy Martin, who later went into the concert orchestra.
Okay.
So he was that good, and he had a tremendous influence because he was musical and he was musically educated. So the standard of the band went up, and that it was a jolly good band.
It was a good band, Alan. I remember actually going to hear them. I was very young, but I do remember going to hear them and being very impressed, and quite a lot of musicians were in the audience.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you can draw musicians to your gig, you have to be good.
Oh,
a lot
indeed.
of them.
Yeah. There was one night B.P. Fallon, who was a bit of a fan, and himself and that chap who was the lead singer with The Next in Line. Do you know?
His father was the great
Adler.
Peter Adler.
Peter Adler.
Yeah.
They came to see us in the Overend Hall.
Remember it? Played there.
And they danced in front of the band as we did something like River Deep Mountain High or something. And
the highest compliment.
Absolutely, so we did. It was a jolly good band, but it was destroyed by the stuff I've just mentioned. So I went so-called back into the beat scene again then with a group called The Light, which later became The Watchtower.
The Watchtower, yeah.
I was with Eddie Shaw and Derek Boston. A funny little trio. At one point, we were playing, we could play 4 or 5 nights a week in the 5 Club, the Moulin Rouge, or the Rouge.
The Rouge, yeah.
You're going down the Rouge.
The Rouge.
And the Go-Go, and the Scene, and the Apartment, and
72 Club.
The 72 Club. And then there were all the little tennis clubs and places on the, church halls and stuff. Like, you could be out literally. I used to consider it a bad week if we only did 3 gigs,
Yeah.
And if you didn't do a Saturday night, you nearly had a nervous breakdown.
Give it up.
Yeah. So that was that little band, for some reason, fell out with each other. And it was I always like to keep the band small because I always reckon with 3 people, there's always one person who gets picked on, and the other guy's back. You know, if you have four, then you have a sort of a difficult situation where there's 2 against 2 or 3 against 1, or, you know. But with 3, it always seemed to work, but it didn't actually work. And Eddie and I weren't speaking, so we used to say to Derek, "Will you tell Eddie
In the same room.
in the same room to turn down a bit, or will you tell Eddie the next gig is so?" And he'd say, "Well, tell Alan I'm not doing it." You know,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
madness.
yeah.
And along came the 2 Callaghan brothers, and a little bass player they had, and they said, "Would I manage them?" And I said, "Well, I can hardly manage myself, but you know." And then they said, "I tell you what," and it was their suggestion, "we'll play for what the other 2 lads are playing." And at the time now, I was very sort of business minded. I used to take half the money and then divide the other half between the other 2. That was another reason for keeping it a trio. You know?
Of course.
So everybody was quite happy. You know, they're getting as much as they would in a quartet anyway. And I was delighted. And I was getting the gigs, and it was my name that was, if it was a draw, you know.
Exactly, yeah. It's going to be on your head, so if
Exactly,
anything
you
goes
know,
wrong...
I did
yeah.
all the talking, and
Yeah.
I had the van, and I provided a horrible PA. And so they said that they'd do it for half the money between 3 of them. So I had a quartet,
Oh, okay.
you know,
Okay.
and a guitar player who was very good, Paddy Kelligan. And that band lasted quite a long time. And then Honor Heffernan joined that. We used to play at the River Club along the quays there. Quite a lot. She was 15 when she first joined the band.
Wow.
And we used to give her one of those orange 10-shilling notes.
For her trouble.
And for her trouble. At first she went, "Oh, no, I don't want money." But Ruby Tuesday was her big number. You know,
okay.
She,
Yeah.
and the Punters, she was, you know, great singer. Wonderful singer. Terrific ear. Never sang out a tune, you know, and would pick up a tune like a light. And has gone on to great things. So that was the Watchtower. So it came that we're now in the 1970s, really sort of mid-70s, early 70s really, the discotheque started to take over. And there was less and less work for the Watchtower. And we were saved in a way by being approached by a hero of mine, Paul Russell.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or Rustler, as he was referred to. And his wife, Grace Emanuel, a beautiful, dark girl. And they had worked for years in Europe playing the American basses. You remember Zhivago's?
I do.
We used to play there quite a bit. But as I said, things were turning disco. First there were just bands, then there was bands and a DJ, then there became, the DJ became the attraction, and they might have a band. Anyhow, things were looking pretty poor, and Paddy Kelligan had left the band at this point, and so it was just Matt, myself, and Honor, and we were approached by the said Paul Russell, would we go to Germany and Italy? And we had to get a guitar player, so we got a guy called Dave Radbourne. I don't know if you've ever come across Dave. Wonderful hippie. And we became the Paul and Paula show. And it was some adventure.
So you were backing...
We were
Paul.
backing Paul.
Okay.
He was sort of your ideal Irish entertainer, big green jacket on him, a big man, and he used to leap out on the stage and sing Country Roads as the opening number. Now, and he had this beautiful wife, Grace Emanuel, who was go-go danced and used to sing "These Boots Are Made for Walking." She had no sense of timing whatsoever. And in the end of that record, they go, "Are you ready, Boots? Start walking." And you come in with din. Well, she could never sing it in time or say it in time. She said, "Are you ready, Boots?" And we're all, "Start walking." It was a nightmare. The whole band was a nightmare. And made worse by, we'd arrive in some American bases and you just look out and they were black. That's all. The entire army seemed to be black. And they were dressed in their fatigues and they'd just come in from some awful exercise. And the last thing they wanted were these white honkies coming out singing Country Roads, man,
Yeehaw.
Oh, and Paul and Paula, as they call themselves, Grace and Paul, used to fight like cats and dogs when they were off stage. And I'm sure they wouldn't disagree with me
in saying that. Yeah.
So we were listening to the you effing this and you effing that in the dressing rooms. Anyhow, Paul had hired a van from Dennis Mahoney in the North Strand, saying that he was going to Cork, and we drove to Naples.
My God.
With summer tyres on it, over the Alps, sliding into the ditches.
Wow.
Getting lost. Paul, up and down the Autobahns. There's Frankfurt. 2 hours later, there's Frankfurt. We might take a quarter of an hour to get to the gig and 3 hours to get back,
Yeah.
With Paul driving, telling you that he knew exactly where he was going.
Yeah.
It was a wild... It lasted, I think we were 2 months, 3 months anyway. And then we came home and we were exhausted. And it looked like as if the group business was kaput.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife at the time said, "Oh, by the way, Noel Pearson has been on the phone. He's putting on Jesus Christ Superstar and he'd like you to be in it." I said, Noel Pearson had gone into production of theatrical events and we did Superstar. Phil Coulter was the musical director. And it was a tremendous experience. Now, I'd never been on the board, so to speak, and it did give me that opportunity. Like, between it and Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which was the next show that Pearson put on, took me onto the stage of the Gaiety Theatre on
of course,
the Olympia, and the Opera House in Cork, and the Savoy in Limerick. We went all round. That I met a few people, notably Sammy Nevin, a guitar player, used to be with a group called Taxi back in the Beat Club days, and he was with the Sounds Showband from Umar.
Oh yes.
At this stage, and I met him because Tony Kenny employed me as his musical director at one stage. Between the shows, Tony would go on the road, and he had records out at the time. Heart of Stone. Tony's a lovely man and very kind to me. He used to put me up in the best of hotels and feed me steaks and stuff. And Sammy was in the Sounds, and Tony got them to back him.
Okay.
With me on keyboards, augmenting and pretending I knew more than they did, and not quite getting away with it. But Sammy and I became good friends, And we formed a little band then with Matt Kelligan, who was still around as a drummer. And we called ourselves the biggest aspidistra in the world, and did all our own stuff. And we did a few gigs, to Bag It In even. And then Joseph came along. That was after Superstar. Then Joseph came along. And the wonderful thing about Joseph was that if Pearson wanted me or Cara O'Doherty or Fran Dempsey, he had to take the band on as well, because we'd say, well, we have bands, you know. Now, we weren't getting any gigs or anything.
Yeah.
But I was like, I have to keep the lads singing. Oh, well, can they sing? Of course they can sing. And can they dance? Well, yes. You know? He said, well, they could be in the show. They'll have to audition now. So it was a wondrous audition in the Olympia. And I was listening at the door to see how the lads were getting on, you know. And I remember the Dazzle band was Caher's band.
That's right, yeah.
And when they were asked could they sing, little Tony Geraghty, God bless his heart, was in the band, and Frank Daly, who I've met recently again after years and years. They all did the audition, you know, and they were saying, can you sing? And I say, yeah. Well, sing something for us. With your long blonde hair and your eyes of blue. Every one of them sang Sorrow. And I said, right, well, that's tick off the singing bit. Now, can you dance? No. Well, you can still be in the show. You know?
Yeah.
We'll make it like palm trees. Or,
It was a great way, actually, of giving musicians work, because when I done Joseph, there were many musicians, because they had 2 or 3 or 4 weeks steady work.
Yeah.
It was great.
Oh, it went on and on. Now, all the lads didn't want to be in the show. You know, they'd rather be playing on the stage, but because their leader was otherwise employed, it was the only stage presentation that I'd ever been part of where there was a dope smoking call by by the management to say, if you have to do that, don't do it in the theatre. Because the lads were rolling up in the wings and everything. You know?
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
That's very good. How many shows did you do, can you remember, between Jesus Christ and between Joseph? In total?
I would have close on 500, I reckon, between the two of them. I know I did over 300 with Joseph.
Wow. And
as the principals dropped out, I would say, I can do that, you know, for an extra 20 quid a week or something. So by the time it reached Dunleary, I think there was just me and Joseph, and the rest were slaves.
That's right, yeah.
I'd be hopping off the stage and into another costume and bounce back out again. And the gas thing is, I hated that show. I thought musically it was one of the worst things I ever heard in my life. In fact, when Pearson played me the demonstration acetate of it, I said, you must be joking that no one's going to go to that, you know?
Yeah.
And yet it was the biggest theatrical production in the history of Irish theatre on one stage. It just went on and on. If you were in the Gaiety, then the next couple of weeks you might be over in the Olympia or down in Cork and back to the Gaiety. In fact, one night in the glorious days when you could park anywhere in Dublin, I used to park outside the stage door of either the Gaiety or the Olympia, and I came into the Gaiety and parked in the, I think it's called Tangier Lane, the Buccaneers there. And I was always left things to the very last minute. And it was about 5 minutes to curtain up, and I went through. First of all, I noticed the stage door was shut. Normally wouldn't be just before the show, people coming in. So bang, bang, bang on it. Guy answered the stage doorman, and he said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm on tonight, come on, let me in." He said, oh, you're over in the Olympia. Jump into the Fiat 800, 850, across
down
Sycamore Road, or Sycamore Street, outside the stage door of the Olympia. the furry jacket, the outfit on, and I had a song to sing quite early in the show, the cowboy number, and I missed the opening of the show and everything, and I just came plowing out onto the stage, Father or something, and everyone went, oh, he's here. That's how
my God.
sort of second nature it all became, those shows, and they went on and on. But then when that ended, well, I wrote one then. I had the audacity to say to Pearson, you know, I could write something better than Joseph anyway. You know? So I thought, and I wrote this show called Adam and Eve. And
I remember.
yeah. Well, not too many other people do.
I do. I remember the time when you wrote that. I did it actually perform.
Yeah, in the State Cinema in Phibsborough, and we got Colin Wilkinson, who was not doing anything at the time, to play the devil in it, and Danny O'Keefe, you know Danny,
on
the
drums,
drummer,
yeah,
lovely guy, and a great friend of Tony Garrity's.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
He said to me one night, I know a fella who would be perfect for the part of Adam. He's a great singer and really good looking tall chap. You'd love him, you know. And I said, I'll get him to come out to the house. So there was a knock on the door, and this Adonis with a guitar in white trousers, I remember. Hello, I'm Sean Sherrard.
Ah, yeah.
Later to become Johnny Logan.
Johnny Logan, yeah.
So I had Johnny Logan, Colin Wilkinson, and a lovely girl from London, Annie Kavanagh was her name, sort of half London, half Australian, fabulous voice. So it was a great little cast, and all the others in it were people I'd come up with in Joseph and in Superstar.
Mm-hmm.
And it ran for 4 weeks out in Phibsborough, and then we went to Limerick and the Opera House, and we were to come back to Dublin, but I made some ghastly mistakes. It went completely to my head. It was, there was stuff in the papers about me being the next Lloyd Webber, and and I allowed myself think that for a minute, you know. And people were offering me this and offering me that, and I was saying, "Oh, the better offer will come," you know. And I just shilly-shallied and got drunk a lot, and it sort of fizzled out, really. Pearson had been going to put it on initially, and he kept backing out of it. And then the van driver with Tony Kenny said, "Oh, here, you wrote a musical, I have a friend who's a solicitor. We'll put it on in the state. He's the solicitor for the owner of the state, and we'll put it on, put a few bob in it." And I thought, how would that ever happen, But that's actually how it did happen. They had to put it on for £8,000. And they did quite well out of it, but I didn't. And they, of course, had no connections. Well, as it was running and had got a bit of momentum to it, Pearson rang me up and said, those boys you have there, they don't know anything, I'll take over the show for a percentage. And I sort of didn't go along with it, I was saying, you had your chance kind of thing,
Yeah.
And at that time, Wilkinson was saying Robert Stigwood was coming over, which never materialised. But the BBC and all were on to me, and I was saying, the BBC, what's it, And in fact, another thing, the American Forces Network in Europe, similar to the kind of gig I did with Russell, the head of them was over for the Castlebar Song Contest.
Of course, yes, I remember that well.
And he saw the show and just loved it. And you guys, you just bring it down a bit in size, and we'll tour Europe. And again, I didn't go along with that. I made shocking mistakes.
Were you waiting for the big offer or the one to come along? Basically,
Yeah, I was waiting for Robert Stigwood. Really.
Okay.
I did. I've never been terrific at the business end of things. Like once it was on and people said how terrific it was, that really satisfied my ego. You know.
Yeah.
But I lost out on it very badly. And I can blame only moi, you know.
Yeah.
So the greatest mistake of my life.
Well, we've all made those, Alan, you know.
After that, then I always had sort of a progressive. We were talking, are you blues commercial or progressive?
Yeah.
I had a sort of progressive group going with Sammy Nevin and Matt. And then
this is after Adam and Eve.
This was after Adam and Eve,
Okay.
so we're talking now sort of the early 80s.
Okay.
And again, there was very few places you could play. The Bag It Inn and Moran's Hotel. There was no money in it. And I got an offer to do a summer season in Termalinas. And boy, did I jump on it, which meant the band broke up. And I've never actually had a band. Well, that's a lie. I have had another band since that, with Jimmy Gaynor in it and Frank Boyle and Dick Farley. But that's a story. I got a gig as a musical director once again for a theatre company in London called Greenfields Far Away. Roland Giacarello was the top chappie, and he got money from the British government to bring informed Irish drama to Britain. And we toured all around Britain. We were everywhere from Milton Mowbray to Milton Keynes.
Okay.
Irish clubs, art centres. And I had the band with Sammy, and at this point Frank Daly and Matt, and they were to come over. We did a show called The Scattering, which was an Irish musical about teddy boys, really. And we were just to play rock and roll in between the scenes. Grand little gig, and we played all around, as I say, around Britain, and they were going to give us this, that and the other. And a week before the show opened, I got a phone call from the lads in Ireland saying they weren't coming over, that they'd got another
gig.
Another guy singing, a songwriter. And I could go, forget it, you know?
Oh, my.
And I was very, very let down about it, over it. And Derek Boston was living in London at the time, and I got on to Derek. He's always been a good friend of mine. In fact, he even put me up for a while. And I told him my predicament, and he said, should we get a band together for you here? There's loads of Irish guys in London, you know? And he introduced me to Jimmy Gaynor and Frank Boylan, who I had known for years.
From the Creatures.
From the Creatures.
Yeah.
I knew him as a bass player, but he was now playing the drums in England.
Oh.
And very good. And Dick Farley.
Great guitar player.
Is a brilliant musician.
Oh, wonderful.
Now, he played the bass because we needed a bass player, and it was decided that Jimmy was more suitable on the guitar to rock and roll. So I had an instant little band, and the gas thing is that when we started rehearsing with the cast and the actors, they thought we sounded wonderful and assumed that this was the band that they were always going to get, you know. So we said nothing to them. And after that, then we came home. Now, at that time, the band was called The Rides.
With a Y or an I?
With an I. And we later changed that for obvious reasons. But in fact, the owner, an old chap of the Toners, we played in the basement of Toners quite a bit, and he called me aside and he said, I don't like that name. I said, why? Rides, like, carnival rides, I said, now why? You'll never get anywhere with a name like that. And we know what you're talking about. So we changed it to the Takeaways or something ridiculous. That was a good little band, and I have homemade tapes, live in Toners kind of thing. And when I play it now, it was much better than I thought at the time. I thought my original band were the only band and I couldn't have them. And this was something we threw together. But now when I listen to it, it was, Jimmy Gaynor's a great performer. And when we came back to Ireland, Dick wouldn't come back. Dick was going to become the next Wes Montgomery. And, so we got a guy called Garrett Brown, a bass player.
From Peggy's Leg?
Yeah, I think it was Peggy's Leg.
Or the Jimmy Slevin band, yeah?
Yeah. A lunatic.
In a nice way.
In a very nice way. So, we had him on the bass with Jimmy, who was always jumping around and wrote his own songs as well. And Frank playing the drums. Any band with Frank in it was going to be entertaining, to say the least, But again, I think because I didn't capitalise on it,
Yeah.
And then Jimmy said, I'm going back to London, there's nothing here. And so that fizzled out. And then I got an offer of Termalinas for the summer. And I haven't really had a band since then. The joys of Spanish.
Was this doing a solo gig,
just
Alan?
A piano gig.
Piano gig in a bar or bars?
In a bar.
Okay.
Jim Farley had two bars in Termalinas.
Right. Yeah.
Big Jim's live music, and then he had a piano bar with a girl singer, and I was the piano player there. And then I did Marbella for Christmas, Porta Banús, sort of upmarket one, again on my own, and then.
Well, I know from my own experience that a gig in Spain, and I've done it in on the Canary Islands, it can sometimes turn out to be a nightmare. In a lot of ways.
I did one in Mogan in Gran Canaria. A bizarre gig, but it's the way they expect you to do 7 nights a week, and you're just like I used to drink my way through the gig, and then I'd lie in bed until the afternoon and get up and have a ham and cheese sandwich and a cup of coffee.
That's exactly what I do.
And I'd wait as long as I could, and then hop into the supermarket and buy a bottle of Spanish sherry or something to cure myself, to go in to do the gig
again and start all over again.
And this would go on all season, so by the end of it you'd be in a pretty poor condition. But it was a lot of fun,
and the money is good.
Well, the money used to be grand. As I say, the Spanish people I worked for would treat you better than Irish people that you work for, but they all paid well. So there'd be stacks of pesetas hidden around the old flat.
Would you go back?
At this stage, it'd kill me. I might go back maybe if I got the chance for a week or two or something. But I couldn't possibly hack a season. And I couldn't drink like that, anymore.
Yeah, that's why I said it can be a nightmare. I mean, I had a hangover that lasted 4 months.
Yeah, well, that's it. Crazy. You're just limping from day to day and hoping you don't fall ill. Like if you did catch a bug, and those places, I did one in Ibiza, and you could possibly see the germs in the air, you know, and it was so overcrowded.
Yeah. So what are you doing at the moment, Alan?
Well, believe it or not, I'm still tickling the ivories in a restaurant in Dame Street.
Of course, you and I worked together in a big band. We had a 7-piece orchestra in the Gresham Hotel. Do you remember that?
Oh, indeed, I do now.
I was the musical director.
You used to wear a sort of proper jacket, band leaders.
White jacket band leaders, and I used to carry a baton, pretend that I was the musical director.
Wonderful.
And I remember that well. We played many times together over the years with Greg, of course, Greg Donaghy, who we're going to have on.
Wonderful drummer.
Yeah, and but have you any? And we ask everybody this: do you have any major regrets in your life as a musician?
Well, as I say, first of all, my biggest would be that I didn't exploit the musical Adam and Eve. You know, like, I mean, it had got potential. There was interest shown in it by various people, and it was my own mistake there. Then, with various bands, I've no regrets leaving the Chessmen any more than I had any regrets leaving Roadstone to join the Chessmen. You know, they were all moves in the right direction. But again, with the band I had with the Rides, Jimmy Gaynor and that, I regret, because it was left to me to do something with it.
Yeah.
You know, and I really didn't pull the finger out, you know.
But despite all that, Alan, you had a great life and you're still having one.
Well, you know, I look around and an awful lot of my friends are dead now, you know. And an awful lot of people that I knew on the beat scene, like Phil Lynott and
Gary Moore,
Rory Gallagher,
Eamon Gibney, another
he's
great singer that actually died.
I heard that and I was astonished to hear that.
Yeah.
And that's the regrets, like as you get older, it's no fun, you know. I mean, your friends are, most of my friends, my best friends are all gone. You know, the guy that sat beside me in school, the guy was my best man. One of the hot dogs, Charlie, who was, you know, the same age as me, he's dead for 30 years now. He was 40 something when he died.
Do you think that you shouldn't be here, or are you quite...
Well, some people say, Jesus, how did you manage to get this far, you know? A friend of mine, a notorious actor, Alan Devlin, we were both Alan D's, like, you know, and he met me in the street in Dunleary. You know, you always sort of try to avoid Alan because he'd always touch you for money.
Libel.
A fierce man for the jar. He in fact walked off the stage in the Gaiety on an old Pearson production of the Pirates of Penzance. I know. I may divert to that story.
Yes, I remember that.
They were at that stage mic'd up with radio mics, which was a bit sort of advanced for me. We always had the mic with the lead hanging out. But he was, anyhow, came on, and he told me about it later. Like the day that he had it started in Dalkey, and he was drinking cocktails, sort of wild cocktails, before he went in to work at all. And he arrived in completely pissed. And he was the Admiral or something. I don't know that show terribly well. But they had a plank sort of through the pit, and so that you, at some stage, people came up and down the aisle onto the stage and off the stage. And he came out to do his thing, and he went, F this for a game of soldiers. And walked down the plank and out through the hall and out the doors and into Sinnett's, the pub that was across the road.
In his gear.
In his gear. And the barman in Sinnott said, what are you doing in here? You should be on, you know. And he said, the show stopped earlier. You know, give me a...
Yeah.
And well, he had forgotten that the radio mic was still on. And this was coming out. And Earl Gill was the band leader. God bless him. Only recently deceased at 83. So I have another 10 years to go to catch up with Earl. Mm-hmm. He struck up the band anyhow. And the stage manager and a few assistants came over and pulled Devlin out into the lane, Tangier Lane at the back of the gate. And they had a stand-in on standby. And they took the costume off Devlin in the lane and left him standing in his underpants. And ran in, put it on the guy, and the show continued.
Oh,
you know.
wow.
What's your favourite record?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how many millions of records have you heard?
Yeah.
And because you need an answer to that, I always say a whiter shade of pale.
Yeah.
And it is actually, it's right up there. And it had a terrific benefit to me. A guy called John Carpenter, a singer from Dundrum, said to me one night, do you know there's a great record out and you should do it because you play the organ. And it's called A Whiter Shade of Pale by Procol Harum, which I thought was a cure for colds or something. Yeah. Anyhow, I learned A Whiter Shade of Pale. I used to play it on my farfisa, and I was, you know, that and Bob Dylan songs gave me a sort of street cred on the beat scene. So I always say that's my favourite record. But I think my favourite musician of all time is Frank Zappa.
Okay.
And I based that on an album that I stole at a party called We're Only In It For The Money. And I thought it, and I still think it's amazing music. Zappa was some genius.
He was. He went too young.
Absolutely. Well,
Alan, that was some superb stories there. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time to come out here and talk to us. And I wish you continued success.
Thanks very much, Ben. Nice to meet you again. Up Elmer Fudd.
Down the chest, man.